Browns fans, the NFL draft not far away. So joining me today is ESPN NFL insider Yates to break things down with the Cleveland Browns draft. Field, thanks for joining me today. Let's get right into it, though. There's so much speculation about what the Browns should do here in town. They have 4 picks within the first 35 selections. What direction do you see the organization taking?
Well, I think ultimately, Derek, what will define this draft for the Cleveland Browns is whether or not the quarterback that they select, #1 overall, because make no mistake about it, it would be a massive shock if the Browns did anything other than take a quarterback at pick 1. If that player becomes a long-term starter, this draft will be remembered for exactly that. But in terms of those 4 picks in the top 35, they have a chance to really dominate the first round because players that are drafted usually between picks 1 and 40 or so, can be expected to be long-term starters and probably right away. Now, the Browns have obviously filled a bunch of holes this offseason around the roster, including quarterback with Tyrod Taylor, at least on a short-term basis, wide receiver with Jarvis Landry. They've solidified the offensive line with some depth-level pieces, and the defense has been improved with potentially multiple new starters in the secondary. This is a chance to further pad that, and I still believe on offense, they can add dynamic playmakers to go along with Jarvis Landry, to go along with the promise of David Njoku and the upside of Josh Gordon.
Now, if you are the Browns, do you go with a quarterback at #1, and who do you think will be in that spot?
I think it would be a mistake to do anything but take a quarterback #1 overall. And the reason why I say that is not because I'm fully convinced that whichever quarterback they select will become a long-term starter for 12 or 15 years in the NFL and change the course of the franchise. But the bottom line is this. For people that are saying, well, if you take a running back like Saquon Barkley first overall, is he a great player? Is he the best prospect in this draft? Perhaps. But if the quarterback that you prefer, and every team has a preference, 1 through 4 of these core 4 quarterbacks, if that player's not available at pick 4 and you bypassed on him at pick 1, all of a sudden you're settling at quarterback, and it's simply not a position where you can settle. So I think the Browns will take a quarterback at pick 1. And again, right now it's nothing more than a guess, but Josh Allen from Wyoming would still be the player that I would lean towards as of right now.
Do you think the history of drafting not-so-good quarterbacks kind of affects the decision by the Browns?
Oh, I mean, of course. But yes, to those on the outside. On the inside, specifically John Dorsey and some of his personnel lieutenants that he hired this offseason and assembled in making this new-look front office, they can't be bound by the history of what has gone wrong with the Cleveland Browns. They weren't hired to relive the past. They were hired to institute a new Browns, a new organizational direction, and the quarterback that they take with pick #1 will have to deal with some of the stigmas that are associated with being a #1 overall pick and specifically a quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. But it's all about not living life through the rearview mirror for the Cleveland Browns, forging ahead and hoping that with the right coaching, development, and talent around whoever is the #1 overall pick, that player can buck the trend that has bothered Cleveland for about 20 years.
Field, you mentioned forging a new direction at the end of the weekend. What does a good draft look like for the Cleveland Browns?
Well, I think it starts with, solidifying the quarterback spot. And again, that's all they're going to have to do is make a pick at #1 overall. But I think beyond that, I think it's important for the Browns to, as I said earlier, add a little bit more dynamic playmaking on the offensive side of the ball. Jarvis Landry, a notable addition this offseason. But Josh Gordon, signed his exclusive rights free agent tender this past year. That's a 1-year contract. You have to add more established playmakers because whoever is the quarterback at #1 overall, you want to take some pressure off of that player. Now, Carlos Hyde, for example, will help you to do that this offseason. But I think players that can be sudden change impact guys who can take the routine play and turn it into a touchdown, a running back who has the electric speed to get to that second level and beyond. That's the kind of offensive firepower the Browns would need to add this weekend to say, something, we are satisfied with this year's class.
That was ESPN NFL insider Yates. Thanks for joining me. Good stuff.